Hey everyone, this is Jay Thomas with the next chapter of Digital Greed. Last chapter I discussed the changes to the game to restrict the real money transactions, and one of those ideas was the introduction of the central market, where each item would have a price designated by the central market, and any trade between any two players had to be balanced. Now that each item had a price that was set by the central market, and that price could change daily. The central market also had a 5% spread between the suggested price that you could trade it at within the central market itself. And the central market was a global exchange where anyone on the game could buy and sell items on that market without even knowing the other player. And since the central market became so important to trading and the economy of the game, this video just kind of describes how that central market worked so that the rest of the chapters make more sense. So, as I said earlier, these trade restrictions gave each item was given a price based on the central market. Person-to-person trades had to be balanced within, I think I said 30,000 GC last video. It could have been 50,000 GC, I'm not exactly sure. That limit was reset every 30 minutes. This was designed to stop the real money traders from operating. If someone wanted to buy 10 million GC, for example, if you could only transfer 50,000 GC every 30 minutes, well, that could take more than a day to transfer a full 10 million GC. So all of this was done to stop transactions between game items and actual dollars. So with this central market, any player within the game could trade on it, matched buyers and sellers without knowing each other. You could place limit orders and market orders. To place a market order, which you just buy at the lowest price someone's selling at, you could just set the offer to the highest amount on the exchange. So if the item was worth 1,000 GC and you just wanted it to buy it right away, you could put your offer at 1,050 GC, which was the highest price you could buy it at because it was 5% over that price. That was the 5% gap that you could trade within. You could place a limit order, so if you didn't want to buy it at, let's say it was trading at exactly 1,000 GC, but you didn't want to buy it there, you wanted to buy it at 975, you could place your order at 975 GC. And so if the price dipped that low, you would get it. You could also do the same thing selling. You could place it for sale at a higher price than what it was currently trading at. And if the price ever rose that much, it would fill and you'd get that order. And again, just to reiterate, each item was given a price and it was allowed to trade within 5% of that price. And of course, when this first came out, the prices were not exact. Some items were priced too low and some items too high. And in that case, you couldn't sell for any price on the central market. If, let's say, the item was given a price of 2,000 GC, but nobody wanted to pay that much, it might only be worth 1,500 GC. Well, everyone's going to try to sell it at the minimum GC, at the minimum price on the CM. And if there's no one buying, that order is just going to sit there. So there's some items where it became impossible to sell on the central market. Some became impossible to buy on the central market. And that became extremely important for trading. Now, this average price, this suggested price on the central market, would update day to day based on the average price that it traded at. So if the item was priced at 1,000 GC and all the trades happened at 1,050 GC because it was underpriced and everyone was trying to buy at that maximum rate, well, the next day that the suggested price would increase from 1,000 to 1,050. Now the new upper limit would be 5% higher than 1,050, so probably a little bit higher than 1,100. So that's just how it worked. Prices would change every day based on that. A few months after the central market was added to the game, some people were manipulating it by, if they had enough money and the volume and supply of a certain item were low enough, you could buy pretty much all the items on it, and from anyone selling on that market. There was no limit to how many you could buy, so you could just completely buy out every one of those items on the market, not let anyone else have it. And then you could also sell them that way once the price went up. So these 4-hour limits were added. to try to combat some of this manipulation. And these were limits on the number of each item you could buy within a 4-hour limit. So for some items, you might be able to only buy 20 of them every 4 hours. If you wanted 100, you'd have to wait 4 times 5 is 20 hours before you could buy them all. So these restrictions were added, even more restrictions to stop people from manipulating the prices on the central market. And of course, with that, some of these items, there were price discrepancies. As I said earlier, some items were initially priced too high or too low, and it was actually impossible to either buy or sell on the central market because the price was just out of line with the current market of what people wanted to buy and sell them at. So those are just some of the inefficiencies added to the market because of the central market and because of the game's strong desire to stop people from trading. And I actually got very lucky with one of these price discrepancies. I had an item that I bought at a lot of them at about 1,500 GC each, and then when the central market was added, the initial price was around 1,850. I was lucky enough to be one of the first people to put all of my supply for sale for the minimum price on the central market, which was 5% below 1,850, so maybe like 1,770 or something like that. I was able to put them all for sale at the very bottom of that range, and then occasionally some people would buy that item just because they didn't want to wait for the price to come down, which might take a week or so. They wanted that item immediately. So they just decided to buy on the central market anyway. I managed to sell my entire supply right away within that first day or two and managed a 20 to 30 million GC profit off of that. I think I invested 150 million, ended up selling it for I guess around 177 million. So right away I had a very good trade on the central market, and I recognized that since it's a global market everyone's trading on, the profit potential from trading on the central market was actually a lot higher than it was before it was introduced to the game. All these restrictions on the real money trading and trying to keep all the trades balanced actually made it a lot easier for a trader like me to start profiting. Some more of these price discrepancies was that the higher tier limited edition items, the PLEI, the ones I just finished, or I was able to purchase one of each, those were valued too high on the central market. I think the people who designed it anticipated prices to continue rising, so they set the prices of those higher, anticipating them to be higher by the time it was released. But because they hadn't increased in price enough to hit those price targets, when the central market came out, it became impossible to sell those on the central market. I think the highest one was worth around 420 million on the central market. That was the initial price, whereas the actual price people were trading at immediately prior to that was around 350 million. So that was a 70 million difference, and nobody wanted to pay the extra amount to buy it on the central market, and everyone who was trying to sell put it for sale at the minimum price, and so there was a huge queue of people trying to sell at the lowest price and no one wanting to buy. And because the price changes on the central market, it was a daily price change, but only if a certain volume of item had been trading. So when nobody was buying these higher valued PLEI, there was no volume, and so the price didn't change. So the price actually got stuck 70 million GC higher than it was supposed to, and this persisted for months. I think it was 6 months before any update was made to these, but in that time period it was impossible to sell these higher end limited edition items. It was just impossible to sell, and nobody wanted them at that point. Everyone was trying to sell them, get rid of them. They wanted cash so they could trade other items and make money on those rather than just holding all these upper end limited edition items. It's kind of strange how that market dynamic worked out, but for a while the highest and the rarest items in the game, nobody actually wanted them because you couldn't sell them and couldn't use the money for trading. Now the more heavily traded items, the price would update every day, and so they were more or less in line with the actual rates people wanted to pay. but there were so many where, and as you'll see in the next couple of videos, this manipulation on the CM and how this lag in the price updating on the central market and the actual market rate people wanted to trade the items at caused a lot of issues. And some of those helped with trading, some of them didn't. Obviously, in this case, if you had one of these PLEI and wanted to sell it and couldn't, that's a huge detriment to you. So how do you get rid of an item that you can't, the game's telling you it's worth something, but no one wants to buy it for that? How do you actually sell it? And so that'll be the topic of the next couple of videos.